Low cost real estate. Those cheap houses, you know what I'm talking about, the ones you can buy really inexpensively. We don't buy many of those these days, but for a while we did, and occasionally we still run across something that's really low cost. But low cost real estate is what we're talking about today on the Sub2Deals Show. Hey, Sub2ers, welcome to this episode of the Sub2Deals Show, where we talk about all things subject to. Occasionally, we may talk about other real estate investing topics, but it's always something to help you with your real estate investing business. If you're joining us on YouTube, we would love it if you would subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell. We release several videos each and every week, and it's always tips and tricks to help you with your real estate. And it's all absolutely free. So why not subscribe and don't miss a single video that we put out. And if you're looking for low cost, quality, creative finance and Sub2 education, we'll ask you to check us out over at $7coaching.com. $7 a month. I'll answer all your questions personally, try to teach you how to buy a few houses. I guarantee you won't find a better, more affordable real estate education anywhere. If you do, let me know about it because I want to know about it. Gosh, I want to sign up. Guys, today we're talking about low cost real estate. What do I mean by low cost real estate? Well, you know those cheap houses. I'm not talking about the $1 million houses or the $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000 houses that we buy fairly regularly, subject to. I'm talking about the really low cost stuff. Over the weekend, there was a post in one of the Facebook groups that I belong to that asked, have you ever bought a house for under $15,000? Tell us about it. And I answered the question. I said, well, actually, my personal best is $100 for a house that was actually livable. And I also bought one for $500 one time that had a tenant in it, paying $350 a month. And someone replied to that post of mine and said, well, how do you find these? Are they tax sales? Are they foreclosure auctions? And I told the young lady, I said, hey, I said, actually, these were neither. It's really a long story. Why don't I do a podcast for you and tell the story? So, Michelle, if you're out there watching or listening, this Sub2Deals show's for you today. You know, when I got started investing, I wasn't very focused on a particular niche like I am today. I was just looking for deals, and we did all types of marketing, from bandit signs to ads in the paper, business cards everywhere, all the stuff that I tell my students are great things to do today, just really boots on the ground type marketing stuff. The only problem with that is you're going to get all kinds of calls, anything from mobile homes to junk properties to burned houses. I mean, you'll get calls for everything. If you're targeting something specific, it's a good way to market, but you're going to have to weed through the stuff that you don't want. And so, of course, from time to time, I got calls on all kinds of things too. Now, what I did learn early on was that I didn't want to become a low-end landlord. It just, and I was the same with mobile homes. Now, listen, mobile home people, I know several of you that do mobile homes, modular homes. The returns are great, but there are just some things that you gravitate toward. And I liked nice houses. I like pretty, I guess Ron LeGrand calls them pretty houses. But occasionally, of course, you get calls on other things. Now, the first story I'll tell you, actually, they didn't even call on our marketing. Driving for Dollars is great. In fact, we're going to put a link in the show notes here on a new Driving for Dollars report that we've put together that's got some great information on how to drive for dollars effectively. But when I first got started, of course, that's one of the things I started doing. I would drive for dollars and drive through these neighborhoods. And very early on, I saw a house that was obviously vacant. And I tried and tried to find the owner. I couldn't find a new address. This was, guys, you got to remember, this was 20 years ago. This was before things like PropStream, and everyone didn't have access to all of these online tools that would find the names and addresses of all these people. So that just became a thing that from time to time I would revisit and try to find the guy, and I never really could find him. And in the meantime, the grass got taller, and actually at some point trees started growing in the front yard. So, you know, eventually a couple of years down the road, you couldn't even see the house from the road. Okay, that's how bad it was. But I had, previously gotten out, walked around, took a look at the house. It wasn't in horrible shape. It was in a decent neighborhood. The house was probably worth, 70,000 or so. But I just couldn't find the guy. Now, a few years into my investing, I got access to one of the tools. At the time, it was called Accurint, or I think it's LexisNexis now. But this thing's amazing. And, if you can get access to it, it's pretty difficult to do. You have to show a need for it. It's really for private investigators, law enforcement, that sort of thing. But I got access to this thing and plugged the guy's name in, and bam, there he was. I mean, he lived in Atlanta. So, I picked up the phone, I gave him a call, and I said, "Hey, my name's William. I'm down here in Macon, and I'm looking at your house, over on Jones Street. So, what's going on with that thing?" And he told me this really long story. He said, "Well, the house used to be my mom's, and she sold it to me when she, got too old and moved into an assisted living. So I bought it from her, and I moved into it and had a small grease fire in the kitchen, and insurance wouldn't pay for it. So I told them they could take the house and shove it." And I said, "Really? So what's up with it now?" He said, "Well, the bank foreclosed on it. I don't own it anymore." Well, I had already taken a look at title down at the courthouse, and I knew that the guy still owned it. And at the time, the term zombie foreclosure didn't really exist. Now, we've all heard of that now. But back then, we didn't know what it was. We just knew that, Bank of America had a $40,000 loan on this house. And, but they hadn't taken any action. And, 3 or 4 years had gone by now. So I asked him, I said, "Well, listen," I said, "if I gave you $100, would you sign a quit claim deed over to me for the house?" And he said, "Well, absolutely." He said, "I'm going to be down in Macon next week, and I'll do that." So I met him over at the house, called up my buddy who was a notary, had the guy sign a deed for me on the hood of hood of my truck. And guess what? I owned a house. Well, I put that deed in a file and got busy and started calling around. I said, "I've got to find out what's going on with this note." Now, the title search told me that the loan had been sold a couple of times and Bank of America was the current note holder. So I just got on the phone one day and started calling Bank of America. And where do I call about a mortgage? And I said, "Listen, my story was, we're doing title on this house down here in Macon, and we've got an open security deed. Can somebody direct me to the right place to get this thing, find out what's up with it?" So finally, I got on the phone with a lady in New York, and I can't remember what department she was in. This was a while ago. And I explained the story to her. Of course, I didn't tell her everything. I just told her that I was doing title work on a property that was being sold, and there was an open security deed showing to Bank of America, but that we thought that had been satisfied. So what could she tell me about it? And she said, "Well, tell me the name of the person on title, tell me the address of the property." And she came back a few minutes later. She said, "We have no record of having that." And I said, "Well, we need to get this cleared up. What can we do?" And she said, "I'm going to send this over to research, and if they don't find anything, we'll send you a satisfaction of mortgage." So a couple of weeks, sure enough, they faxed me a satisfaction of mortgage. So I went down, recorded that thing, extinguished a $40,000 mortgage, and owned a house for $100. Now we went into that house. It was livable. He had a grease fire in the kitchen, and it had done a little bit of damage to some cabinets, but otherwise the house was fine. And so we went in there and we spent, I think, about $7,000 or $8,000 on that house. We put in new carpet, we painted, we replaced a couple of cabinets, and had a perfectly good $70,000 house that I bought from the owner for $100. So that's my story on the $100 house. Of course, now we know zombie foreclosures exist and how that works, but at the time, that was a new deal for me. Now, the second deal that I mentioned, where I bought the house for $500 that had a $350 a month paying tenant, did come from marketing. And I had a lady call me one day and she said, I have a house I need to sell. I knew it was in the innermost older part of town. She told me all about the house. I asked her, she said, I said, how are you a landlord? Because this lady was probably close to 80. She said, well, my husband and I bought a lot of property during the 60s and 70s, and he passed several years ago. And I've been selling them off slowly. And this is, one of the last ones that I have. And it needs a little bit of work. And I just, I'm too old to have to fool around with it. It's got a tenant that's been in there. She had been in there for about 10 years. She was an older lady. And I'm tired of her calling me and telling me this needs fixed and that needs fixed. So I knew the houses in that area were probably worth $35,000, not a whole lot. And if I recall, she was wanting about $10,000 for the house. But I'll tell you, by that point, I had gotten pretty much defined in what I was looking for. Generally, as I said, pretty houses and not older 100-year-old houses in town. And so, as always has been my case in a deal like that, where I really just don't want the house, our advertising says offers made on all calls. So I feel an obligation to do that. But I'm going to make it an offer that even if I don't want the house, if they say yes, I'll smile. So I told her, I said, that's really just not what we're looking for. I could buy the house from you, but probably the best I could do would be about $1,500. And she just couldn't believe it. What? I can't believe that. There's a tenant in there paying $350 a month. And I said, well, ma'am, I understand, but that's just not really what we're looking for. Now, I can take it off your hands, but that would be the price. And she said, well, no, I don't think I want to do that. And I said, well, I understand. And, best of luck with it. And that was that. Now, we had a lengthy conversation about her days as a landlord. So we developed some rapport, but she called me back a few days later and she said, Mr. Tingle, I've decided to take your offer. And I tell you, I really just did not want this house. And I said, well, ma'am, I understand. I said, I've done a little bit of checking around about the house, the value of it, and, probably the cost of the work that it may need, which, I mean, it was just minor things. I mean, the house was old, but, to keep it safe and things like that, it would need just a little bit of work. I said, and to be honest with you, probably my offer today would be about $500. And we had about a 5-minute conversation about how ridiculous that was. But she said, you know what? She said, I'm just going to take that and be done with this. So, this was a super inexpensive deal. We didn't even go to a formal closing. I had her meet me at one of my banker's offices. I had a banker at the time that I worked with one of the larger banks I worked with there, that had given me a substantial line of credit. And we used to joke a lot about real estate. And I used to like to tell him just shocking stories about some of the stuff we did. So I thought, I'm going to meet this lady in his office and let him notarize the deed and everything else, just for the shock factor of him seeing me buy a tenant occupied house for $500. So I met the older lady there, and she signed the deed for me. And I said, now, you said you had some other houses that you wanted to sell. And she said, oh yeah, I've got a few more, but you're not going to steal those from me, honey. So that's what we did. We bought that house for $500, immediately put it on the market, and actually had an Atlanta investor buy it. And that was an interesting thing to watch unfold. We had an Atlanta investor buy it from us. They came down. I don't know what they appraised the house for, but at the closing, she pulled out. I think we sold it for 45 or 50,000 to her, and she pulled out about $80,000. And if I recall, I don't think she ever made a payment on that loan. She pocketed that money, And I don't know what happened with the tenant. We got one payment from our tenant, so we actually had $150 in the thing by the time we sold it. So, it's really funny. We tell our students this all the time. You can never assume what a seller will take. As far as price. I could tell you stories about numerous deals over the years that we've done that I offered just ridiculous amounts, and the seller said yes. Uh, the story is where you will find your offer. I'll tell you this each and every time. This is the best advice you'll get today in real estate. Listen to the seller. Don't focus on the house. Focus on the why. A house is a house is a house. They typically have bedrooms, bathrooms, a kitchen, a living room. But the story, the seller's motivation, is really where you'll find out what kind of offer will work. So take the time to have a conversation with your seller, and that's where you'll find out where they'll go with price. It's not always about the price. Most of the time, lots of times, it's about the problem. So hope that helps. Hope that helps, Michelle. Give you some ideas. It's not always a tax sale or an auction where you get a ridiculous price on a house. Sometimes it's just dealing face to face with sellers. So anyway, that's it for this episode of the Sub2Deals Show. Hey, listen, if you liked this, subscribe to our channel and give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast. We would super, super appreciate that. So until next time, get out there, talk to some sellers, make some offers, and buy some houses.